Good morning, everyone. Yeah. So today we'll be looking at a very simple topic, I'll say, in Flutter. And how many of you have ever given a talk, or you had to probably stand in front of people and just present something? Sorry. All right. So during the process of preparing that document, how was it? Was it really fun? Like, was it straightforward? Let me say. Yeah. Okay. So generally, for example, if this differs, right? There's a call for paper, and you are thinking, okay, what should I submit? How do you go about it? Picking the topic, writing the abstract, and submitting it. How do you go about it? Mhm. You use AI. Oh. So before AI, what do you do? Mhm. Google I/O. I just didn't know what to talk about. Like it got to a point where I felt like everything has been spoken about. So I mean, what is new, right? And a friend of mine just gave me an idea that and you can just go to Gemini and type, and it think there's a lag. Okay, my name is Bright. I'm from Ghana, and I'm a Google developer expert for Flutter. You have a talk or submit, let's say you have a presentation to submit, you basically need to sit down, think of the topic, the abstract, even look at the audience and the location, because if the audience isn't matured enough and you present something very technical, they'll just be looking at you without any understanding. So again, there are a lot of things involved and it requires a lot of research. So again, speakers, I mean, and writers, they face problem where they want whatever they are writing to be captivating enough. What you're even writing will be engaging enough. And the worst one is you even submitted something before and you don't even get any engagement on it, right? Probably using AI as your co-writer. So in this case, you present the theme to the AI. Okay, I'm I'm supposed to speak on this theme, parameters that you've given it, then it gives you options. So in this Wait, is it my network? There's a lag. Okay. Huh? I'm sorry. A lot is it is more updated than most of the other language. The model 2, I think 3.5 or something, right? It hasn't been trained on that data yet. So we are building a simple application, and you can actually get the source code here. It's on my GitHub, and just scan it and get access to the source code. So basically, in this application, what we are doing is, I remember there was an interview that I had to go through, and I was presented a bunch of random questions, right? This or that, coffee or tea, early bird or night owl, right? They ask you all these questions to determine your personality, right? So I added a twist to that. So I created a simple game where it asks you similar questions, and based on your responses, it will use those responses to write a story. So that story is basically about now your personality, right? And that's what basically the app is doing. So you feed in your choices into Gemini. Gemini looks at the choices, and then it will craft a very good story for you. And then you can save it to Firebase, you can share it and whatnot. So here there are 4 categories. We have general questions, we have about food, we have deep thoughts, then we have funny stuff, right? So let me launch this. Okay. Okay. So I'll just take you through the code base and explain some of the concepts to you. In fact, I wanted to actually advance it a little by adding the images, right? So see your coffee generates the image, but I realized that image generation actually takes time, right? So I tried the Vertex, the imaging API, right? And it took time to generate the image of a coffee and tea. And I didn't think, it would be cool enough when you're playing with a game and it takes time to render and just an image and all that. So, there are a lot of improvements that you can do because it's open source. So if you feel like you're up to the task, you can just probably have an idea or two on what you can do. Maybe when starting the application, you can probably generate some of these images because it's basically static text, most of them. Let me see. Like the question, they're just static. But if you want to make it engaging enough, you can actually let AI generate this. And one way to actually get this nicely done is using GenKit. So GenKit is a framework that you can basically use with any AI model, and you can actually state the output. That's the clever thing, right? Which means that if you want the output to be in an object form, there should be a field called this, there should be a field called that. You can just have that in there, and no matter what, it will return you that response or the response in that form, right? And I know I'm going to something else, but yeah, so Jenkins basically helps you easily to get this form of structure, like without having to do a lot of work. Because with something like Gemini, the API itself, it returns the data in a string form. You can tell it to return it as a JSON, but sometimes it's JSON, and the data in there is Markdown language, right, with a hash and all that. So yeah. Yeah, so these are the questions, just like random questions that I found on the internet, and I placed them here. I mean, there's a login in there, it's just a login, no sign up. So then I think the important part is the questions part, right? The power of any LLM is the prompt. A good prompt, a good response. If you write a bad prompt, you get a bad response, right? So in fact, the first prompt that I wrote, it was this kind of misbehaving. So what I did was I took that prompt, I gave it back to Gemini. I told Gemini to refine the prompt, right? And it did. So this was what it came up with. So basically, sorry, let me see if the app is running. Yeah. What did I do? What credential is okay. And I'll just use this. Okay. Yeah. So having my prompts ready, the next thing is basically the choices, right? So I mean, this is more of just programming, I assume. So I have this function. Good. So I'm timing everything. So I have about 40 questions, but I don't want to display all the 40. That'll be boring. So I'm picking only 10, and I'm picking that 10 at random. So I have that 10, and after every 30 seconds, it skips. So if you don't answer within 30 seconds, it skips to the next one, right? So over here, basically, that's what we are doing. I mean, if the answered questions are not isn't equal to what we pass to it. It's, I mean, it just keeps the timer just keeps running until the timer is done. Then we pick whatever. So if there were 10 questions, you answered only 2. We create the story based on those 2, right? And that makes it a little more harder for the LLM because I mean now there are only like 2 options, so it won't be that creative. So now we have all our selected output. The next thing is probably just pass it in. Is harmful because I mean there's no guardrail. Okay, don't do this. I mean we just try to write a story, and story can be anything, right? So if you look at the options, so the tone, right? You're like it should choose over here line 7 to put in those guardrails because the AI doesn't really know. It's just go with the flow. And then yeah, then basically I mean we have actually use this package in production, right? I mean, if you go to pub.dev, you see there written very boldly, because when you do that, let me see this one thing, yeah, over here, right? It's fully prototyping, so that's why I actually suggested GenKit. So in that regard, you don't have to expose your API key, because as you can see, although I'm actually doing this, I'm actually trying to inject the key into the application at compile time, but it's still not safe enough, right? So with something like this, it's better you separate your backend from the front end. So currently I'm just adding everything together. Yeah. So now we have this. There are some security settings you can also set. Again, if you know kids will interact with this, probably have to set them. Otherwise, the LLM will probably generate something that is not supposed to generate, and that may bring you a lot of issues. Then we move ahead and pass that prompt into the text context, and then we just generate. And upon generate, we have funny animation. Okay, let me see if now it's let me hard code this. I don't want to be typing there. Just moving on. So I have this fancy animation that I show whilst it is generating the text. Then the next thing we have is the text. So okay, good. So it's done. So this is how apps looks like. So when I pick something like food, so let's see, maybe we can just go row to row and just answer it. Just choose any, the first thing that comes into your mind. So this, the next person. Third question. Yes. Dark chocolate and white chocolate. You said? Okay. Dine in or delivery, yes. This. Okay. Pineapple. Hot dogs. Okay. And okay. Okay. All right. So let's see. I mean, let's see what it will probably generate. Okay. I don't think you can see, right? It's small. Man, I mean, yeah. Like, but basically, this is what. Let me see if there's a way I can. Uh, this. All right. So big. It's okay, right? Or too big? Yeah. So basically, this is what it came up with, right? Yeah, and I think. Basically, I mean, this is a story it's come up with. So just some extra features we can. Oh, this just broke my code. Okay, we can actually save it in a way that it gets saved to Firestore, right? Yeah.
I just wanted to ask about the API that you're using.
It's Gemini.
It's Gemini, right?
Yeah.
So, can you, does it have a limit on how far it can be or how racist it can be?
Okay, so as I said, right, you need to set in the guardrails. That's one thing. But by default, right, if it detects something that's to do with, let's say, self-harm or hate speech, it will block it.
Okay, so it won't allow me to.
No, it won't give you the output. It will throw an error that I mean, this is not allowed. So that's when you have to change your safety settings. So if you turn, let's say, self-harm to false, it means that if the generated output contains that, it will have to allow it. You get it? Yeah. But I mean, you probably shouldn't because it will get you into trouble. That's the thing. Right. Yeah. So I think probably this story is interesting enough. Yeah. So basically, I mean, this is just the whole thing, right? And the implementation is actually very vast. And I added text to speech to it, but I think for some reason it's even funny. I don't know. Um, yeah, it's even funny. Yeah.
What can you use for text to speech?
Yeah. So I used DeepGram. DeepGram. So DeepGram gives you the synthetic human-like voice. So it seems it's a human reading out, but it's an AI, their own AI. Yeah, so it does speech to text and text to speech. So I'm coming. Um, they have both. So let me see. Yeah, and also you can use your own voice for it. So they'll give you some passages to read out. It records your voice, and then it clones your voice. Right. Yeah.
And how do you ensure that my voice can be like, without my authorization?
Oh, yeah. So it's a paid service, right? Which means that if I am using my voice, shouldn't use it for someone else. No, usually if it's a free service, that's when they do that because you're not paying for it. So somehow you need to pay. Yeah. So I mean, it's a paid service, but they give you a free, I think $200 for free for you to try. Then yeah. But I mean, yeah. So I mean, it's actually smart enough to know, and um, usually the problem is with the languages. If it's not English, so it has some, let's say the global languages, right? If it's more like the local level, it struggles a little. Like it's pronounced some things not in the right form. Like you try to pronounce it at how you type it out. Yeah. Right. So I mean, any of these services, and it's basically an API, so you can use them for real time. You can stream the voice or the input and the output all to it. So I've added it, but for some reason, let me look at the log. Yeah, so because I think I'm running it on a simulator, it's not playing the audio. Yeah.
Yeah, want to take iets wat ik gebruik voor de presentation op de was actually more I use things of not actually what are some of the benefits and key takeaways you would say comparing stuff like the act data for confident and stuff like that the mobile space.
Okay. Luckily, I've actually done all these frameworks. So yeah, I think one thing about React Native, probably I would say is if you're someone that you already have a web background, you already know JavaScript or TypeScript, right? And you are not willing to learn a new language, I mean, it's okay to stay in that space. That's the thing. Because if you look at Kotlin multi-platform, Flutter, React Native, they're all trying to solve a problem, right? And at this point, it doesn't even matter the language or the approach. It's now you, the individual. What do you already know, or what are you willing to learn? If you feel like, oh, I probably want to learn that language, you can just go in for Flutter, because at this point, that is no more just for Flutter, right? Now that is used on the back end. You can extend that to create your own CLIs. You can basically use that for a whole lot of things, right? Which we don't usually speak of. It's usually just Flutter. So if you are willing to venture into all those space, you can just go in for it. The interesting thing about that is, there's this thin line between all these languages, right? JavaScript, TypeScript, even Java, Kotlin, Swift, right? That has cut across all this. So when you learn that language and you pick a Kotlin code, you can actually understand what is happening in there, because the syntax looks so much alike, same as Java, C#, and all that, right? So, I mean, at this point, if you feel like you already know JavaScript or TypeScript and you are not willing to learn a new language, you can stick to Java, React Native. But if you feel like I want to learn something new, I want to venture into another space, right? You can learn, have a language under your belt. It becomes very easy, because I think personally I use about 3 hours to just learn them. Because if you go to that.dev, you can actually view their documentation. And they take you through step by step on, I mean, how to, yeah. So when you go to, I think docs, go to language store, right? This is where I can minimize this, right? So you see here, like on my right hand side, this is basically not like in the entire language, but this is the simple high level of the language, right? You have functions, components, import. Basically, that is it, right? And if you already have some Java, Kotlin background, or even JavaScript, TypeScript, you can probably go through this in a day and understand, because an int is an int, a string is a string, a class is a class, right? So yeah. So I mean, if you want to learn something new, you can come to that side. If not, if you want to stick to just JavaScript and TypeScript, you can be on React Native level.
Thank you so much.
How much of a performance difference notice between like native Android development, with Java or Kotlin versus like a framework like Flutter?
Yeah. So the reason why I actually switched to Flutter, which was in 2018, so I was working on the project. It was a courier service app in my country. That was like the first. So I was looking so much to Uber and Bolt using the architecture for everything, right? And it was written in Java and Android. We used about 8 months for the project. After we launched, we opened up to other, so we're doing it for motor riders, right? After we launched, we opened up to salon cars, and people started coming in with iPhones. So I was at that point where my boss told me it's either you learn, that was when Swift UI also came newly. So I was like, I mean, either you learn Swift or Objective-C, or you learn React Native. So I developed the rider side. My friend developed the user side, and he used Ionic. So it was like either I learn Ionic, React Native, or native iOS, and create this. And I think I just saw an ad on Flutter. I'm like, let me try this. The first time I tried to install it, I didn't understand anything because I didn't understand what was declarative UI. Like I was looking for XML. I wanted to do drag and drop so that I can just get and go back. I mean, there was nothing of that sort, right? And I think back then, so there was only one tutorial on YouTube by Pawan. He's from India. That was the only tutorial on YouTube. So, I mean, it's like a do or die. So I used that tutorial, and what caught my attention was when I was trying to create a recycle view, right? In Android, recycle view in Android, you need to create an adapter, you need to create a UI before you need to connect everything together. And when I tried it in Flutter, it was like 3 or 4 lines of code, and I didn't understand how, right? Then, I mean, I was like, I'm just going to stay here. The entire project, I rewrote the entire project in 6 weeks using Flutter. So that is the productivity side of it, right? Because in Android, I mean, you need to, back in the days, you need to create your XML, then you need to call in your component in the Java or the Kotlin side, then I mean, it's a whole bunch of gymnastics, right? But in Flutter, your UI is basically your code. I mean, you are writing everything in there. So ever since then, I just switched to Flutter. So the productivity for the cross-platform is actually very high compared with the native. Because with native, if it's just Android, you have to write Android, Java, or Kotlin. You need to now write Swift, right? And if you are the only developer, that is a lot of work. And also, that is you switching language. I mean, where I work now, because we are dealing with a lot of low-level hardware, I mean, I have to write Kotlin and Swift code in a day. And sometimes I'm writing something in Swift and it's not running. I'm like, why is it not running? And I was like, oh, I'm writing Kotlin code in Swift, right? I mean, it happens. So imagine I could actually do everything in that. I don't have to worry myself. I mean, but although having that knowledge is helpful, but I don't have to basically be switching between languages. So yeah, I mean, I believe you work faster when you use a cross-platform compared with a native. And also it depends upon your company. If your company is okay maintaining 2 platforms, that is fine. But if they want to cut cost and get just 1 platform, it's also fine.
So
which would be better for the app and speed and overall everything, which would be better when you create that as a native app or transport in terms of speed and from the user side.
Okay, so in terms of speed and performance in production, have you seen app in production before? Yeah. Yeah.
It is a native app. It is purple. So has used SCOM support. Pretty much everybody I met, right?
I remember I've seen a picture once where they were ranking all the native and the cross platforms, right? And after the native, the Android, iOS, the next one I know there's a new version of React Native, I think 0.75, and they're making noise about it, but it's still not there. Yeah, I mean, they said they removed the bridge, but the bridge is still there. They just made it go to, let's say, imagine what where this app, click on it, it downloads, I open it. I mean, it's much easier for them, right? So that's the thing. I mean, PWS are cool, but at a point, I mean, and more of an Apple is very strict on them. But maybe one day they'll open their doors, but as of now, probably just go with native.
Is it like, do they give them a hard time? Because sometimes, or like I've seen a few PWAs at Play Store, do they give them a hard time before they actually allow?
No, I think generally no. I think it's the same process for everyone. Yeah, it's the same process.
On App Store, like on iOS App Store. Yeah, so I didn't know if it was a PWA or it was built with Flutter, that the file size for the application was like kilobytes.
Oh.
Yeah, so I don't know if they push the PWA to the App Store or they use Flutter in some sort of way.
Yes, one thing with mobile apps, so I mean, that's one thing that I've also done before. You can actually deploy a light version of the app, and then you later load the rest, right? We do that a lot when time. So we do that a lot when you are creating an app that is very huge. So the company I work for, Biki, we have an AI model in our app for security purpose, right? And we don't add it when we are bundling the app. Otherwise, the size will be almost like 1.2 gig. right? So what we do is when you download it, then when you install it, then we download it into. So just like how games work, right? So like after you download the game, tell it to download some additional resource and all that. Yeah, we use that approach. So yeah. So sometimes I think the right, but at the end of the day, when you go back, it's almost like 1.5 gig. Yeah, yeah. That's it.